Hey there, Stuart, and I'm going to be talking to you about self-discipline today. Now, we all know that self-discipline is crucial, right? After all, it's a way of ensuring we've got delayed gratification. Sometimes it's also an adherence of certain kinds of regimens that you put out for yourself. Maybe it's a workout routine, maybe it's a way by which you clear your work on a day-to-day basis. At the end of the day, I'm not really the most self-disciplined person in the world. And I wish I had learned these lessons way before in order to help pick me up from wherever it is that I was. So I'm going to dive through 3 key psychological theories of motivation and discipline. And you can take a look at which one seems to fit best with you in order for you to generate the best possible momentum forward in 2023. I think the first thing that comes up to me for self-discipline is the fact that you either discipline yourself or you're going to get disciplined by somebody else. It could be the law. It could be something else. So what's important is to be able to recognize that we need to take on the role and responsibility for disciplining ourselves. Otherwise, other things will get in our way and attempt to restrict us. So the irony is that the more restriction you give to yourself today, the more likely you're going to experience freedom much later on. I discovered this when I was studying. In the good old days, I was really just clamoring, studying last minute so I could pass, hopefully. And unfortunately, that didn't work. At one point of time, I was so complacent with my studies, I was thinking, I can leave it to the last minute. Eventually, I only scored a borderline pass out of 8 subjects, and I passed 3. Now, that was shocking to my parents because they obviously thought I was kind of able to manage my studies after I had learned my accelerated learning skills and so on. But it came as a shock to them, and it was not my competency. It was my attitude. So I wanted to make sure that all of you are kind of on the same page, because I am not a person who says that you must discipline your life and there are no rules that can be bent. No, I bend the rules all the time. But what's more important is we need to come up with an understanding of how this idea of discipline can work in your favor and sometimes can get you into a little bit of trouble. So let's dive into the 3 motivational theories that I'd like you guys to take a look at. So this theory is known as self-determination theory. It was developed by Ryan and Deci from 1985 and revised in 2000 in their 2 landmark papers, where it suggests that the fulfillment of 3 innate needs of autonomy, competence, and connectedness are the key drivers for optimal human functioning. What is autonomy? Autonomy basically is the feeling that an individual has that they can chart their own direction and they can control their own behaviors. Competence refers to the learning of skills and capabilities that once learned will enable an individual to take actions towards the directions that they wish for. In other words, it's also going to help them to achieve the goals that they want. And the last one, connectedness, is about the sense of belonging with a group of people. Have you ever discovered that whenever you are in a group meeting and the group needs something, and when you volunteer to carry out that particular task, in other words, take on some form of leadership, you tend to be much more self-directed, autonomous, and demonstrate some level of competency in aid of other people. Now, this kind of proactive behavior actually happens within the social setting and is determined by social conditions. And this is one of the key findings where if you want to drive your behavior, you need to have some kind of social support network. That's why I'm so hot about sharing about the power of networking and how you can establish a really strong network moving forward. If you want to expand your knowledge of how to do things like this, go watch the video I did on professional networking. It's going to help you to establish stronger and better and more relevant connections with other people moving through your social life. 2 other things that are very important. The first one is feedback. Now, obviously, with a social support network, you can get more feedback, and that's going to fuel your competency and your ability to direct yourself towards your goal. The other one is a form of motivation, extrinsic motivation, that can confuse your motivations for doing the thing that's needed. So for example, if you're supposed to get your work done, but there's an extrinsic motivator that says, if I play this computer game, I'm going to have a lot more enjoyment than just studying this paper. So it's likely that with extrinsic motivation, you're going to get distracted away from what is meant to be completed at that point of time. Ultimately, this theory suggests that there are certain traits in self-determined people. Number 1, they have a strong internal locus of control. In other words, they believe that they have a way to determine their own life. This was put very succinctly as the inner circle, what you can control, and the outer circle, what you cannot control. And people who feel that they've got a strong locus of control basically know exactly what they can control and they don't sweat the rest of it. In fact, they also have a middle tier which is known as the circle of influence. In other words, they also take responsibility for the kinds of actions and behaviors that they could influence that might influence the things that they cannot directly change. For example, I might have a very strong locus of control of switching on and off this camera. However, I might not be able to switch on and off someone else's motivation. However, I might also be able to influence another person's motivation by learning the skill sets of how human psychology actually works. And that's one of the pathways that I can take in order to increase the likelihood of me motivating somebody else. Number 2, they have high self-motivation. And self-motivation is nothing more than being able to see the future, being able to design your own emotional states in order to drive towards the goals that you want. Intrinsically, they want to set goals. They want to put themselves on a pathway towards some form of excellence, and they're willing to suffer for it. Number 3, they will base their actions and behaviors on their own internal designs. So they will not just do something simply because someone else told them to do so. In fact, some of the so-called rebellious people in the world, they have a high level of self-determination because they will decide, they will understand, they will dissect, and they will plan for the goal that they wish to go for, and they will exhibit in the way that they choose to be best. 4, they take responsibility for their behaviors. For example, there are some people who are so depressed that they fall off the rails and they're unable to pick themselves up. That's because they don't take responsibility for their own feelings. In fact, they might not even know that they're responsible for their own feelings. Self-determined people, on the other hand, they recognize and they catch themselves when they are doing something that doesn't help them. And then they go and find out what can be done in order for them to take off to the next level. So as a theory of discipline, the ability for us to move into discipline actually comes from these 3 key factors. Number 1, being motivated by intrinsic rewards rather than external rewards. Number 2, being driven by an internal sense of satisfaction and desire rather than being driven by obligation. And number 3, feeling in control of whatever things that you want to do compared with feeling helpless and out of control. So these 3 things actually drive discipline. Now, if you put yourself into that context, then it makes sense to ask ourselves, how in the world do we actually increase our motivations? On that note, it means that we need to go back to the baseline and ask ourselves, how do we actually craft self-determined behaviors for ourselves? In my opinion, I think it's all about the ability to manage your emotional states. In the psychological literature, there are 2 other theories, and I'm going to take both of them. I'm going to be a little bit irreverent and kind of lump them together because I think they belong in the same model. But again, that's just me. It's not the representation of the actual theory. So the first one is called impulse control theory. This theory suggests that self-discipline is a process of changing your cognitive states and also regulating your emotions in order for you to set your goals, make plans, and move forward in life. The final theory is cognitive behavioral theory, which suggests that whatever happens inside your mind is the thing that determines your actions. So if you simply regulate your thoughts and your cognitions, you're likely to be able to do things like set plans in motion, monitor how you think and how you feel, track your own progress, and set your goals. Likewise, it also gives you the ability to modify your behaviors, especially when you see that there are unsavory habits that are popping up in your life. So taking a look at the idea of being self-determined in the first place should inform us of a few things. In order for me to get to my goals, I need to be able to fuel myself with the right kinds of actions. However, it doesn't follow that if I always take an action, I will always arrive at the goal that I want, thereby suggesting that I have to modify and to be even cognizant of what I have to modify in order to change my behaviors along the way. Next, we also need to recognize that in order for actions to change, I need to be able to change my thinking and I need to be able to manage my emotions. So how do I manage emotions to take action? Most people don't ask that question. In fact, very few people do. I discovered that in order for me to change the way I take actions, I simply need to change the way I feel. So changing the way I feel, for example, if I rile and hype myself up before a major football game, for example, it's very likely that I'm going to get myself into a state of maybe aggression that might be congruent towards my goals of taking down the opponent's forces. However, I also have to bear in mind that it's just a game, and therefore I need to regulate my behaviors. Now this goes in something called a feedback cycle. In other words, I have to think about it in order to check whether or not that emotion is appropriate in the first place. So again, thinking about the goal that I want to accomplish, what action do I need to take? And based on that action, how must I feel in order to be able to take that action? After all, if I'm depressed, it's unlikely that I'm going to take certain kinds of actions. If I'm joyful, I'll take a certain type of action. If I'm highly driven, determined, ambitious, I will have yet other sets of behaviors. So I'll need to start asking myself this question. What is my desired state of affairs? And what is the driver state? How will it be able to help me to drive my actions? But that's not enough. One of the things that we've come to realize also is that even though I can pump myself up or rile myself up, it doesn't mean that I know exactly what to do. So I might have a lot of motivation to do something that I have no clue or no competency in doing. Therefore, there's a process that enables you to think about the exact steps that you need to take, and then when you are in the appropriate emotional state, that process flows through. In neurolinguistic programming, we actually call this the swish pattern, which has been around since the 1980s. So all you need to do is to have a trigger that enables you to get into that emotional state, and that emotional state will drive the very specific procedure by which you carry out your action. I discovered that by accident. I actually wanted to develop a habit of working out, and during that time I was running. Unfortunately, because I was so scatterbrained, every time I wanted to go running, I would end up having a shower first and then coming out and realizing that I'd forgotten to run. But because I'd already taken a shower, it prevented me from even wanting to go out and have a run in the first place. Another situation happened when I actually changed out into my gear, but then as I opened the door, a creeping feeling of dread came over me and I just didn't want to go run. And yet another situation was going down and starting to run, but never even completing the run. So you see, the procedure by which you carry it out in your mind is so crucial. And this is one of the things that I talk about, which is atomization. Taking a behavior and then being able to visualize it clearly across the steps that you need to take will most certainly help you to get into that habit much more easily, and also to anticipate some problems so that you can put yourself into a state that is going to help you to do that. For example, whenever I encounter this feeling of dread, I tell myself, no, you have to do this. It's an obligation. Whenever I'm running halfway and I get completely flat out, I will think about times where I was called to do something important, maybe not for my sake, but for somebody else's sake. And I'll play these make-believe images inside my mind so that I could galvanize the right kinds of resources to keep going and see myself completing that entire run. In other words, it becomes a very intentional thing, which brings up the idea of self-determination theory. I have my own locus of control. If anything, neurolinguistic programming simply expands the self-determination capacity that we have by teaching us how exactly to modify those emotions. Now, there are quite a few ways to modify emotions. Some of them are faster, some of them are slower, but it all boils down to the start of the way we represent information in our heads. So it's not just good enough to have a cognitive behavioral view, it's about the representational system of that cognition. For example, you can see things in your mind, you can hear a voice or a sound by making it up, or you can have sensations and feelings. So there are three primary representational systems: what you see, what you hear, and what you feel. Now, if I were to modify how I see things, if I saw a picture of somebody laughing at me and I feel bad, that functions as a trigger to a negative state. So in other words, there's a cause and effect cycle from my cognitions to my emotions. If I change the meaning of what I see in my head, or I change the structure of what I see in my head, I'm also likely to change the effect on my emotions. If I am a stage presenter and I see somebody laughing, that might change the frame of reference altogether. Likewise, if I made pictures inside my mind that were detrimental to my feelings, for example, I would create a mental image of a whole range of people who insult me, that's less likely to engender positive feelings, right? So I need to find inside my mind some examples or some situations where I might have been praised or supported or encouraged. And those internal voices could be amplified By making it louder, I can actually amplify the feelings inside of me because they're intrinsically linked. So how does it feel if you close your eyes and thought of your best supporter and encourager and confidant who says you can do it? And then you modify the sound in such a way where it's not just highly encouraging, it's also empathetic and it's also a statement of belief in you. Now, if you were to hear this from not just one person, but 10 people inside your mind, how differently do you feel? Chances are you're going to feel an amplification of those emotional states. That's the reason why self-discipline is really about knowing how to regulate the cause and effect cycle between cognition and emotion, emotion and action, action and results. So if you can see that as a chain effect, then all we need to do is to learn how to shift the way we think. So if I made something brighter, like someone laughing at me and they are making fun of me, and I make it brighter, it might cause my emotional state of anxiety and being ridiculed to amplify. Is that a state that I want? Likewise, I can do the same thing by amplifying the feeling of nausea whenever I'm looking at my favorite food, and that amplifies a negative feeling. But at that point of time, is this negative feeling useful for me? So that's another thing. If I am able to utilize bad feelings that are useful to help me with my desired outcome, in this particular case, I want to take a look at ice cream and feel nauseous by, for example, imagining it's made up of blended maggots, I guess. Sorry for those of you who are ice cream lovers. Then I project into the future and ask myself, if I were to feel this way, would I actually want to eat, and will that lead to the desired outcome that I want? Chances are you get the picture now. So I'm constantly shifting the mental frames inside my head, utilizing a variety of variables, like the contrast in my head, the size of the image inside my head. Is it close to me or is it far away? Is it brighter or is it darker? Does it have colors or does it not have colors? In fact, as I'm thinking about this, the sounds inside my head also could play a big part. Is it louder or softer? Is it closer to me? Is it in surround sound? All of these could affect the way I feel. The words that I used, if let's say they're just generic words, you can do it, is that really meaningful? How about a specific phrase that maybe your mom said? I remember one of my good friends, this friend of mine came up to me and said, "My vote is with you." And that was a very significant period of my life, and it stuck with me because when somebody says, "My vote is with you," it reminds me of that poignant moment where I was affected by somebody who really first believed in me, and I was really elated to hear that. With this, I am pretty sure that I can modify the sounds. I can even add certain kinds of music that can impact the way by which I think about the environment that I'm in. So if I want to be relaxed, I'll imagine playing relaxing music in my mind. If I want to pay attention to someone and that person has an irritating voice, I can swap it out for someone, in my head at least, who has got a much more pleasant voice. It brings me back to my social psychology lecturer back in college. Now, this is not to say that there's no effect on other things. I mean, you can use your mind all day long, but what if it's a physical deficiency? And this is another piece that I want to triangulate as we go through the journey. Now, you got to understand, in my younger days, I always thought that, oh, mind over matter, everything's going to be about the mind. Until one day, I knew my mind was still functioning, but I was so fatigued and so tired. I didn't understand what was going on inside of me. I tried to hype myself up. It lasted for like 5 minutes, and then after that, I just crashed. And then it dawned on me that there's something else that might be missing. And this is the concept of physiology. So let's put it this way. If I can think of pictures in my mind that were exciting, chances are I can also affect my neurochemistry, right? So I'll have more adrenaline, more cortisol inside my mind. If I can anticipate that the future is going to reward me, and I imagine the reward today, wouldn't that also increase the amount of dopamine as if I've progressed? Because the mind can't really tell the difference between what is real and what's totally imagined, right? So here's the thing. Many of these hormones and neurochemicals that are created and manufactured need to have a base based on the intake of food and nutrition that you've got. So what I discovered was that there are a lot of nutrients and supplements that I was missing. So can you imagine this? I pump myself full of sugar, I'm going to have a lot of energy, at least for a while, and then after that I get a sugar crash, right? Can I stop it? Yeah, I can stop it, but I got to avoid taking too much sugar. At the same time, there are other supplements and this huge myriad of different nutritional things. For example, I've always known that vitamin D is a great vitamin to take on a regular basis. So standing in the sun helps you to generate quite a fair bit of this. But did you know that vitamin D is better transported throughout the system if you've got good cholesterol? And how do you get good cholesterol? You need to eat the good fats. And where do you get the good fats? Your omega-3 fats, like Thomas DeLauer calls it SMASH. Sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. So these 5 different kinds of fish produced in the wild will be able to produce relatively good quality omega oils so that it can transport not just vitamin D, but also a lot of other nutrients that are dependent on our cholesterol to transmit throughout the rest of our body. I didn't know that. So I was thinking that eating noodles 3-4 times a day was keeping me full, but I was simply just spiking my insulin all the time, causing me to have some pre-diabetic symptoms in the past. Fortunately, I'm kind of over that right now, but I'm monitoring the situation very, very tightly. So nutrition is where the devil is in the details. It's such a broad system. I did not know that by taking vitamin C, I was probably taking a manufactured form until I listened to this guy called Dr. Eric Berg on YouTube. So if you'd like to find out a little bit more, I definitely recommend Dr. Eric Berg as the main go-to person to find out details regarding some of this, and he has a very old video that actually highlights the structure of the vitamin C cell and why ascorbic acid actually can damage you rather than assist you in causing vitamin deficiencies in the first place. So when you think about nutrition, you probably think like, hey, I'll just eat my fruits and all that, and that's good enough. Unfortunately, there's some trace minerals that are either over-amplified, like if you're eating bread that is enriched with iron, you've probably got too much iron inside your body already, and you're taking even more, right? Which causes oxidation to take place in your body. Now, I can go down the rabbit hole across all of these. I won't bore you with the details, but if you happen to be interested in the area of nutrition and how I dropped from 85 kilograms down to 68 kilograms, utilizing just purely nutrition, no discipline required, well, a little bit, but you get the picture. I'll be very happy to share it with you in a subsequent video. You got to get the right nutrients in. Secondly, you need to get the right sleep in. I thought I could go on forever by just sleeping 4 hours a day, but unfortunately, fatigue hit me and I ended up being a little bit more fatigued than I thought. So I would sleep in for like a week, sleeping 10 to 12 hours every single day. Obviously, there are a lot of factors related to sleep. I won't go through the details that most people on the internet already know about, such as blackout curtains, making sure you've got blue light blockers, not drinking too much before you go to sleep, otherwise you'll have to wake up in the middle of the night to go and pee, and all those kinds of things, right? There are probably more things related to the circadian rhythm that I'd like to talk about in a subsequent video, but that's all about brainwaves. And brainwaves can be controlled, and it's a form of helping your cognitions. So actually your physiology affects your cognitions, right? So if you were to shift your breathing patterns, for example, you're likely to get better sleep, especially with the research that Andrew Huberman has brought up much more clearly, where you do sharp breath in and a slow breath out. That tends to put you into a more relaxed state. And comparatively, if you want to get hyped up, you go, right? And you're building up that adrenaline inside your system, controlled 100% by you. So you can shift the neurochemicals inside your body on demand. If you want to go into a relaxed mode, you can also sleep much better if you can bring your beta brainwaves all the way down to theta brainwaves. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the subsequent video. Just wanted you to know, and if you'd like to, open up the doors and ask more questions. So it seems like there's a trifecta in affecting your actions. You need to have the right emotional state that is useful for you. You need to have the proper physiological condition, and you need to have the proper cognitive condition. So with these three, they're going to interface with your ability to act, and then you'll typically form a habitual cycle based on the feedback that you get, are you progressing, and so on. Chances are you know this, but it's never been put into a specific framework for you to think about. And trust me, there are a lot of ways by which you can utilize this model in order to get to wherever it is that you want to go. So now that you've completed this video, what I'd like you to do is spend a little bit of time just jotting down some ideas as to how you can move forward. Do you find that you're self-determined? Are you able to generate the right kind of purpose, the reasons why, the motivations for you to want to move forward in the first place? Do you have control over your impulses? If not, how can you find ways to manage those impulses and to increase the likelihood of your delayed gratifications? Is it possible for you to switch out your cognition so that you can change your beliefs, your internal narrative, so that it can support you in moving in the direction that you need? All of these things will then lead to a personal theory of self-discipline that you can now lean into. Of course, there are other factors such as your physiology, which might be missing from these original psychological theories because they're not primarily looking at physiology. So are you sleeping right? Are you exercising right? Are you getting the right nutrition? All of these things will factor in. Now, it does seem therefore that you need self-discipline just to have self-discipline in the first place. So I believe that everybody will need some kind of guidance and systemization in order for them to get from one place to the other, in order for them to get to a higher level of functioning. But all I can say is that if you can't do one thing, just do gradual practice over a period of time. That's what I've always encouraged people to do. Look, the scientific literature is wrought with many things about how you can change your cognitions using mental visualization to reduce pain, enhance performance in certain areas, even athletic performance. So what does this mean? This means when you do this on a day-to-day basis, you're going to get better and better and better at being able to create the kind of discipline that you need. And what is discipline other than a manufactured set of hormonal changes, a set of ways of thinking, and even if you have to remind yourself, you're just getting yourself into a better and better habit every single day. So it means structure, it means monitoring your progress, it means giving yourself a sense of the reward whenever you're moving in the direction that does work. So if you happen to drop off from the habit, what can you do in order to get back on that habit rather than just bashing yourself up and having even more negative self-talk? So it is iterative in nature, and what I do encourage you to do is to at least start. Do it even if you need to spend 1 or 2 minutes doing it and accumulate it over a period of time. Utilize the cognitive strategies that I shared with you. Amplify good states before you take action. Utilize good feelings so that you can feel good for no good reason. And that's where we might be able to find an advantage because the literature has already been giving some evidence that we can manage pain. We can manage positive hormonal change just simply through the process of visualization. While there's still not very much research being done in this area, probably because nobody's really going to make very much money from it. After all, visualization is free. And what you can do, therefore, is utilize a free cocktail of biological resources inside your body in order to get to where your goals are. So the mechanism of discipline is right in front of you. All you need to do is apply it. So go ahead and practice this, and if you found it helpful, type in the results that you got in comments down below. And if you've already practiced certain methods like this, type in your comments down below anyway. If you liked it, please subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so that we can reach out to more people and benefit them with the science of psychology and mindset so that they can elevate themselves from their current level beyond suffering and challenges and take actions for abundance.